Could you please contribute to your husband's caregiving costs a bit? The eldest son's wife, with whom compatibility was poor, had become estranged over time. Suddenly receiving a call from her, her voice was clearly filled with dissatisfaction and anger. She bombarded me, bewildered, with rapid-fire accusations. This left me confused and, instinctively, I bristled, ready to retaliate. But, in reality, we were both misdirecting our anger at each other. The real adversary for us was elsewhere. I'm Kate, 72 years old. Decades ago, I was consumed with raising 2 children, but that's now a distant past. My son and daughter, who once required so much attention, now have families of their own and live independently. For the past few years, I've been living quietly, my days unremarkable. I never imagined such a significant event was about to unfold. It all started with a phone call. One day, as I was about to prepare lunch, my smartphone suddenly rang. Who could that be? Rushing to see, the caller was my son's wife, Amy. How unusual. I paused for a few seconds with the phone in hand. Truthfully, since my son Ken got married, my relationship with Amy hadn't been good. And now, out of the blue, a call from her. We had grown distant, not seeing or even contacting each other for years, perhaps decades. Hello? Tentatively, I answered, my voice quivering with a strange tension, to be met with a sullen voice from the other end. Hello? It's been a while. This is Amy. Her voice was so low and pressuring that I couldn't afford the luxury of feeling nostalgic. Yes, it's been a while. Are you well? What's the matter? I asked, knowing she wouldn't call without reason. After a slight sigh, Amy slowly and clearly made her request as if dictating to me. Yes. I'm calling about your husband. What? Him? Why? Amy cut off my bewildered response, raising her voice even more. I understand you have your own situations, but at this rate, we're going to fall apart. Fall apart? What do you mean? As I continued to be confused, Amy, now more agitated, pressed on. Please contribute a little to his caregiving costs. Caregiving costs? Her manner of speaking contained an indescribable anger towards me, her rapid speech only intensifying it. I understand it's hard. We feel terrible that we can't provide care due to work, but it's unfair to ask us to increase the monthly support we're already giving. The terms caregiving and monthly support were alien to me, coming one after another. Confused, I hurriedly asked for clarification. Wait. Caregiving? My husband? Ken's father, your husband, that is. Her tone was almost mocking. Having endured since the call began, I finally snapped at her blatantly disrespectful attitude. Well, I don't have a husband. I found myself responding more sharply than intended. There was a moment of silence, perhaps due to my unexpected reply. I took a moment before responding. Sorry for sounding mean, I'm just confused. But it's true, I don't have a husband. I divorced him 10 years ago, so I'm single now. Didn't Ken tell you? From the other end of the phone, I heard a gasp of surprise. She really didn't know anything. Something was off. Since it seemed like it would be a long conversation over the phone, Amy and I decided to meet in person for the first time in over a decade. The next day, we met at a diner. Seeing Amy after such a long time, it was clear we had both aged, but she seemed particularly worn. Had she always been so indifferent to her appearance? After brief greetings, Amy shared her story. Since marrying, she had been sending a fixed amount of money to my ex-husband at Ken's request. About 10 years ago, Ken suggested increasing the amount because my ex-husband needed caregiving. Amy had already been sending a significant amount and protested the increase, but Ken told her, "Look, we're almost 40 and still don't have kids. It's probably impossible to show my parents a grandchild. I'm the eldest son, after all. So, I at least want to make it up to them with money." Ken and Amy hadn't been blessed with children, perhaps due to marrying late. I understood the urgency, being a woman myself, so I never brought it up, but it seemed Amy felt guilty about it. Thus, she agreed to increase the amount at Ken's insistence. I agreed because I thought Ken was right. But then, just the other day, he said it wasn't enough and asked for more. Amy was trembling, looking down. We're almost in our 50s. Thinking about our retirement, we can't afford to give more, she protested to Ken. His response shocked me to the core. He had the audacity to tell his wife. Since you couldn't be useful as a wife, at least contribute with money. How disgraceful! I was speechless, and although our finances are tight, I'm sorry for taking it out on you. I'm the one who should apologize. I don't know how to make it up to you. I bowed my head to Amy, who was doing the same. I decided to have my son apologize later, but there were still many things that didn't add up. For one, I had never received cash from Ken before or after the marriage. I had never heard of any remittances. Furthermore, the news that my ex-husband needed caregiving was news to me. Around 10 years ago, when we divorced, he was in good health. If something had happened after our divorce, my daughter would have contacted me. According to Amy, Ken was supposedly helping with caregiving at my ex-husband's house every weekend. I tried to go help on my days off, but Ken told me, "Don't come because my mom dislikes you." How absurd! Why was Ken keeping our divorce a secret? Further conversation revealed many misunderstandings between us. I thought Amy disliked me, and she thought the same of me. However, it turned out that Ken was the source of it all. Reflecting on it, Ken had told me things like, "Amy says your cooking isn't good," or "she really hates coming over." That's why I was somewhat averse to Amy. It seems she felt the same, having been told by Ken that I said, "I would have preferred someone younger," or "she's not attentive or charming." She stopped visiting because Ken said I didn't like it. But thinking back, neither of us remembered making those comments. Now, talking face to face, I didn't sense any animosity from Amy. It all pointed back to Ken being the cause. Why would he deliberately cause discord between his wife and mother-in-law? What was he thinking? I decided to call Ken first. I didn't jump to conclusions, but tried to understand the situation. Ken seemed annoyed but responded normally. However, when I casually mentioned, "By the way, how is Amy? I'd love to see you too after such a long time," his attitude changed drastically. He became flustered and started making excuses to end the call. When I pressed on, he snapped in frustration. "Stop nagging. That's why Dad divorced you. Amy hates you too, so get a clue." And with that, he forcefully ended the call. He was clearly panicking. Of course, he would be troubled if Amy and I met. He had kept our divorce a secret from Amy. I'm sure he hung up the phone with his heart racing. Amy's story was starting to seem more credible. Regrettably, if that was the truth, I couldn't support Ken going forward. Setting aside Ken for the moment, I contacted my daughter to learn about my ex-husband's current situation. As expected, my ex-husband was perfectly healthy. This meant someone was lying. Ken was a given, but what about my ex-husband? Was he in on it, or? After discussing with Amy, we decided to explain the situation to my daughter simply as he messed up and asked for her cooperation. Ken's birthday was coming up, so we used that as a pretext. We proposed a family gathering to celebrate his birthday for the first time in years, with my ex-husband, Ken, me, and my daughter attending. My daughter reached out to them to arrange it. I thought it was a bit of a stretch, but Ken didn't seem to mind. In fact, he was quite enthusiastic, saying, "Don't forget my birthday present." My son was so gullible. According to my daughter, my ex-husband was looking forward to seeing me. Both were blissfully unaware of the impending judgment. Amy and I meticulously planned and finally arrived at the day. We decided to use my daughter's house as the venue. Just in case, we asked my son-in-law to stay in a different room. As we prepared for their arrival, my ex-husband and Ken came together. Seeing my ex-husband after 10 years, he lit up and rushed over to me. "It's been a while. I've missed this. It's nice to see you looking so well." He didn't seem to need any caregiving at all. I said it with a hint of sarcasm, but my ex-husband, mistaking it for concern, scratched his head happily. People say I don't look 70. You're looking pretty good yourself for your age. Almost makes me fall for you all over again. I nearly gagged, but managed to swallow the comment with a smile. As we all sat down at the table and my daughter served tea, I steeled myself. Shall we begin? Glancing at Ken, he was busy gobbling down the snacks and tea. When our eyes met, I decided to speak. Ken, you're already 47. Time flies. Yeah, and you've turned into quite the old lady, haven't you? Ken snorted, and my ex-husband chided him. What are you talking about? She looks way younger than her peers. Yeah, you're right. Some of them even need nursing care now. Both Ken and the ex-husband shifted their gaze, avoiding eye contact. Seconds later, the ex-husband awkwardly cleared his throat in an attempt to divert the conversation. Well, I'm glad you look well. I've been wanting to get in touch, but, you told me to stop. Thanks to you, I'm doing fine. With a smile, the ex-husband seemed relieved and began to speak more comfortably. I'm glad to see you. Actually, I was hoping that, starting today, we could spend the rest of our lives together again. The ex-husband looked at me with a firmer expression, as if to emphasize his point. And then, as if delivering his punchline, he declared confidently. Let's live the rest of our lives together, however short it may be. I'd rather you keep your dreams for when you're asleep. To the ex-husband, who looked at me with sparkling eyes, I smiled even more brightly and told him clearly. Oh, so I was just the housekeeper before the divorce, and now you want me as a caregiver? Isn't that a bit too convenient for you? The ex-husband froze, and when I added, because you need care now, right, he started to flounder. Where did all that confidence and suave demeanor go? He looked at Ken next to him, seeking help with a face like a fish out of water. Ken twitched his eyebrows while looking at me. What are you talking about? Dad and Mom are still perfectly healthy. Oh, really? By the way, Ken, I heard you've been visiting him on weekends lately. That's very filial of you. Ken twitched his mouth, saying, "Aw." Right, and I have a present for you. It's also a birthday gift. I pulled my bag closer and took out a file to hand over to them. Ken's eyes widened as he took the file. This is... The file in Ken's hands was filled with intimate photos of him and an unknown woman. All these were secured by a detective agency. It was strange he kept leaving the house every weekend when there was no need for care. That's why Amy and I decided to hire the detective agency. The results were damning. Ken had been meeting his mistress every week. He didn't even try to hide it, allowing us to gather a significant amount of evidence easily. Even the detective agency was amazed at how straightforward the investigation was. How do you like them? They're well taken, aren't they? Ken trembled, holding the file, his face turning beet red with embarrassment. Such private matters. Private? I was informed you were proudly walking arm in arm in public. Ken, face as red as an octopus, stared at the file. And? What happened with this person? Ken hesitated for a moment, then slammed the file on the table, glaring at me. You know full well. Yeah, she's the other woman. It's Amy's fault for losing her charm and appeal. If I was satisfied with Amy, I wouldn't have cheated. I nearly threw my tea in his face, so outrageous was his excuse. It's a shame to see the son I once adored become such a worthless man, just like his father. The reason I divorced my ex-husband was his infidelity. He's always had a wandering eye. But he was so charming and persuasive that I often forgave him. Finally, we divorced 10 years ago when another affair came to light, this time with someone we both knew. Moreover, the ex-husband had moved on to this other woman. He said a wife is just like a housekeeper, so there's no love there. That revelation led me to finally decide on divorce. Fortunately, the alimony from both sides meant I didn't have to worry about living expenses. When we got divorced, even Ken said it was impossible for him to cheat. What I meant was, it's impossible to get caught. I was confident I could handle it well. Yet here he is, caught red-handed. How can he say such a thing with no sign of remorse even when faced with all this evidence? I exaggerated my response in disbelief. I received a hefty alimony from this man, too. It really helped. I wonder how much your alimony to Amy will be. Immediately, the color drained from Ken's face. Wait, Mom, please. I'm begging you, don't tell her. He staggered to his feet and knelt before me. You don't like Amy either, right? I'm going to divorce her anyway. Just keep quiet about this. His pitiful groveling was just like his father's. All right. I won't say anything, I replied, and Ken looked up, relieved. He was about to say you always understand, Mom, when I called out through the sliding door to the next room. There's no need to say anything, right, Amy? At that moment, the door slid open forcefully, and Amy, looking furious, appeared. Ken let out a pathetic scream and collapsed. Amy! Why are you here? Wait a minute. I'm so confused, my head is spinning. Amy marched up to Ken and stood towering over him. Why am I here? That should be my line. What's all this about caregiving and filial piety? I heard everything from your mother. Ken, blinking rapidly, received no chance to argue from Amy. I don't need any excuses. So, all the nasty things you said about your mom were lies, huh? What did you want to achieve? Did you enjoy tearing apart the relationship between your wife and mother-in-law? Ken was so intimidated that he fell on his buttocks, shaking his head vigorously. It's not like that. I just needed a bit more pocket money, so Dad and I pretended it was for remittances. As Amy tilted her head, Ken muttered quietly. If Mom and Amy got along, you'd find out right away. So, apparently, he and his father had conspired to siphon off money under the guise of remittances. They increased the amount 10 years ago because of the alimony payments to me, leaving the father financially strained. Still, there should have been enough for a normal life, including the father's retirement pay. When pressed, they sheepishly confessed. It seems they both had been squandering money on their mistresses. Upon learning the truth, Amy sighed deeply and looked down on Ken with disdain. As you wish, let's get a divorce. And you're going to pay back all the money you lied about and took from our finances. Including the alimony, of course. But I don't have that kind of money. You can sell your precious car. The rest can be paid in installments if necessary. If you don't pay, I'll have our mutual friends storm your workplace and spread the word. My car! Ken's eyes welled up with tears. He glared at Amy and raised his voice in protest. That's cruel. You're a demon. And you're not embarrassed to tell your friends, admitting you're a woman scorned by infidelity? I've done nothing to be ashamed of. I haven't lied or cheated. If anything, my only mistake was marrying you. Ken had no response to her point-blank declaration. He slumped to the floor, sobbing quietly. Amy, looking somewhat relieved, stood up and said, I'll consult a lawyer and contact you later. Ken couldn't even respond, continuing to cry. After Amy and I returned home, Ken remained in the same state for a while. Despite his father's attempts to console him, he lashed out, blaming everything on his dad. Eventually, Amy and Ken divorced. He's reportedly making the alimony payments as agreed. Believe it or not, Ken came crying to me as well, but of course, I turned him away right at the gate. There's a limit to shamelessness. Moreover, it seems he also begged his affair partner for money, only to be rightfully refused. Apparently, he was quickly abandoned once he ran out of money. What's more, it turns out the affair partner was married, and now he's being sued for damages, and it seems he's completely out of options. On a peaceful afternoon in a cafe, while sipping coffee, Amy said, He really seems to be cornered, contacting me every day begging for help. Just the other day, he was crying on the phone. Look, here he is again. Showing me the call history on her smartphone, Ken's name was listed all over. I'm sorry, I must have raised him wrong, I replied, to which she smiled warmly. It's all right. It's more about genetics, I guess. From his father. We looked at each other and laughed, agreeing, indeed. Now, Amy and I meet regularly to catch up. We're closer than one could ever imagine a daughter-in-law and mother-in-law could be. I wish we could have become this close sooner, but it can't be helped. It's all because of that good-for-nothing father and son. Rather than lamenting the time wasted, we must enjoy what's ahead. Life is still ahead of us, isn't it, Amy? Raising our coffee cups, Amy chuckled and raised hers too. Of course, Kate. And we laughed together again, clinking our coffee cups in a small toast.